Victoria, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. It's my first time on DefCamp, so I very appreciate you here. Today we will talking about Breaking the Cloud, AWS edition, because I'm AWS community builder. Also, I'm penetration tester and security engineer at Techmagic. I working with web, cloud, and mobile, mostly pen tests. Also, I'm a musician, CTF player, I think like everyone here. Love boxing, tourism, traveling, coffee, and I'm from Ukraine, Odessa, so if you want to drink coffee, listen music, discuss cybersecurity, not boxing, but I will be very happy to see you. And this is Giant Me, just to join me on network, don't forget how I look like. So our agenda will be about misconfiguration, as was mentioned. So the overview and impact the misconfigurations in AWS, how to avoid misconfiguration, a little bit blue teaming. Get started with AWS penetration testing. I just want to ask, do any of how many of us are working with AWS? Yeah, nice one. Maybe some information will be very easy, but it's a needed step to proceed with other tools. And of course, best practices and safe, effective testing. So let's go. First, before some easy stuff, I always introduce some example to understand why are we here and what we will talking about. So there are lots of situations with AWS and some misconfiguration and how it became very, very bad situations. This presentation will be shared with us. So at the end, I will share QR code when you can download it. So all these active links and examples to read more deeply about it will be available. If we're talking about overview, so what went wrong? So we had a threat actor who founded some exposed environment variables like credentials, and the environment was enumerated, so with get caller, identity, list users, list buckets, and this credential, even though they was not administrator ones, there was possibility to create role, and after this create role to attach policy and to attach it to the administrator access. So they assumed a role, and after this get full access to exfiltrate data and place some ransom. So overview, misconfigurations in the AWS is like always something when occur to cloud resources and not set up securely to intended, leading to potential security risks or even not potential ones. So common types of misconfiguration in cloud, it's overly permissive IAM roles. So when you start to losing wildcards or for example, you need S3 access, but you put get, patch, delete everything there. So even if you need only to get the object. Of course, it's misconfigured S3 buckets, so sometimes infrastructures need to add some pictures which are in the S3 buckets and forget just to hide everything else. Or I saw the situation when you can access S3 bucket only with using VPN, but after VPN was changed or something like that, so administrators just infest put out this setting and forget just that they have a big amount of S3 which was related, which was hidden with this stuff. So also public-facing resources like unsecured EC2 instances, RDS databases, or Lambda functions. Also from my perspective, once one EC2 instance with known IP was running the site, and it was under the DDoS attack. And what happened? That Cloudflare was applied, but IP was already known, so nothing was changed after this setting. It's the other stuff we will talking about, that you sometimes in cloud systems, so many pieces, I don't know, of your system when you just can forget how it can be related to some other part. Security group mistakes, so wide open rules for SSH or RDP access, and insecure serverless architecture, so like mismanaged API gateways or Lambda permissions. Why do misconfiguration happen? First of all, it's human error, like manual configuration mistakes, lack of understanding of security best practices, or even just sometimes you need to deploy something, and who works with AWS and make it securely, you know that when you want to do something unusual, you faced a lot of access controls which you have no opportunity just to proceed. You need to change your settings, and sometimes users just give for themselves administrator access just to finish a task, just to finish a workflow, and forget about this as well. Complexity of cloud services. So as I mentioned, the cloud is related to a big amount of parts, services, and big infrastructures are really very, very hard to control, or sometimes it's even very expensive if we're talking about AWS. So AWS offers over 200 services, and just to configure them and control them every time, it's hard, and again, it can be expensive. And services evolve quickly, and changes applied also quickly, so it's always potential misconfiguration can be applied. And of course, it's lack of security awareness. I don't know what to mention now, because I don't know most of you working with developers or have your security team or something like that. So sometimes developers or DevOps, they can be focused on functionality over security. We have no security champions in your team who can just to control this, so only need to do it faster. And as I see over last year, a lot of situation when AI was applied, and business just thinks that new functions can be applied also very quickly, and it's really more and more situation when some security is missing. And organization may not have clear security policies before we have a breach. Let's talk about some real-world examples from 2024, to not mention AI. I think you heard about it a lot today. So, for example, attacker was able to exploit misconfiguration with website to extract some sensitive data, including AWS credentials. So over than 2 terabytes of data was compromised, affecting thousands of organizations. And as you know, it can be business risks, a compliance risk, and all of this. The second example is one from which we start. So again, web servers was exposed with environment variables, and after getting them, it was able to do unauthorized access, even if this was not administrator credential, but some misconfigurations in configuring IAM roles. Misconfigured AWS 3 bucket exposed sensitive data, like publicly accessible S3, due to misconfigurations or just due to someone forget to hide it. And of course, exposure of sensitive customer data. And if we're talking about customer data, again, it's not something related to good development of your organization in future. And application load balancer misconfiguration, so it also was a situation with improper implementation of authentication, and of course it was able to exposure thousands of web applications to unauthorized access. This situation was finished with informing, so like some logs was informing administrators that something happened wrong. So how to avoid misconfigurations? First of all, to follow the principle of least privileges. I try myself not to tell you it 10 times today, but maybe. So restrict IAM roles and policies only what is necessary. From all the security, you know that blacklist is always not very good idea, and white is better one. So just to add only those functions that you really need, and really it's better to add it step by step when it's needed, maybe for access for not forever, just you know that you need to update S3, for example, you want to finish this task over 3 days, so you can get access only for these 3 days, and no one will forget about to change this privilege. Of course, it's regular audit, so review S3 buckets, permissions, security groups, IAM roles. AWS has lots of native tools for this because they understand this problem and potential risk. So really a lot of tools can be applied here, and in next slides we will also go through some not native but third-party tools, open source one, so maybe sometimes it can make your solution cheaper. And utilize AWS tools, as I mentioned, is AWS config, IAM access analyzer, guard duty, security hub, so just to help identify misconfigurations early, and automate security checks. So as I mentioned, to use some third parties sometimes help to detect potentially risks, and also in our work we recommend to do it when the team has a strong DevOps or security team, or just specialists who can work with it mostly effectively, because if there are no so technical or no staff who can, who can apply it, it can be not very cheaper because of hardness to apply it. And getting started with AWS pen testing, so why we need to perform it, the same as with regular penetration testing of application or something else. So we want to identify vulnerabilities before attackers do. And again, in case of AWS, to identify vulnerabilities lately sometimes mean to pay very high cost, because some services was running in not your needs. Also to validate security controls and configurations, and improve overall security posture in your cloud environment. So it's sometimes hard to start to set it when you have a giant project with a big amount of services. So start to running all these tools can be a little bit challenging. But when it's already set it up, so you just have 1-2 issues a month, a week, so it won't be hard to proceed with. And key attack surfaces in AWS. So first of all, it's identify and access manager, so our IAM. Sometimes we have over-permissive roles and policies like wildcard permissions, or as I mentioned, full access for just S3, but which can follow you to some other techniques of attacks. Misconfigured trust relations between accounts and weak or exposed access key. In AWS also there is good technique not to use administrator access even for administrator. Storage services like S3 buckets, elastic file system, so some publicly accessible S3 buckets exposing sensitive data. Sometimes they store users' data or host even websites, so it's misconfigurations are really important then. Also improperly configured permissions of EFS and lack of encryption for data address in the transit. So we heard about encryption on last session, who was on this track. And compute services, EC2, Lambda is one which are really mostly exposed nowadays. So EC2 with open ports or some vulnerable software, so everyone knows about chains attacks. And configured Lambda functions allowing privilege escalation and exploitable IAM roles attached to compute resources. And network components like security groups and VPC, so again, we have overly permissive one, exposed VPC endpoints that should be internal air, and misconfigured network access control. What we need to know about AWS here, again, who will download this presentation, is a link when you need to recheck what can we do during the pen test and what cannot be tested because it's out of scope because it's AWS environment. So what you can test is, of course, your assets, EC2, S3, Lambda, IAM roles, your network configuration like security groups and load balancers, and applications and data. But you cannot test anything related to AWS, like AWS managed services, physical infrastructure, databases, snowflakes, everything related to this, and AWS services themselves. So if we're talking about methodology of penetration testing, maybe not you, but we have step 1 reconnaissance, we have step 2 vulnerability assessment, exploitation, post-exploitation, and reporting. So let's go through the steps. If we are talking about reconnaissance, we need to identify, assess, and resources within AWS environment. It's really a good opportunity if you can draw your system to understand the infrastructure and know what related to what, like some Bloodhound, but in AWS. And use tools like CloudFox, Scout Suite, and AWS CLI for enumeration. If we're talking about vulnerability assessment, so we need to analyze the environment for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, and some tools I can recommend. It's Prowler, Nmap, and Paco. We will go through them in the next slides. AWS penetration testing will close step 3. It's exploitation. So we test identified vulnerabilities, some privilege escalation techniques via misconfigured IAM roles, for example, and demonstrate access to sensitive information or some compromised data, like, again, some variables or user data on S3. Post-exploitation includes to determine the potential impact by accessing data or literal movement and just to check that found IAM was not honeypot one, and show how it can be done by an attacker. And again, reporting, the step everyone hates from penetration testing. So we provide detailed report on findings, so how it was discovered, potential risks, steps to conclude, and impact, and of course recommendation for remediation. Let's go through some tools. I want to start with CloudFox. It's a wonderful one with asset enumeration and attack surface analysis. What I want to mention is that tools from this presentation I mentioned are open source one, but some of them have some paid functions, paid functionality, so they was not mentioned in this presentation. I just want to include something which is cheap. So CloudFox is an open source tool which helped with identifying assets in AWS environments. So very useful for penetration testers, or as I mentioned, if you have some security champions in your teams of developers, DevOps, so it will be very valuable to use as well. So what tools is designed for? It can be resource enumeration, so like list all IAM roles, EC2 instances, S3 buckets, attack path identification, so maps our potential privilege escalation paths, and services size, so help to visualize which services have public access or potential misconfiguration. good stuff that, you know, the last 2 days I joined a few presentations talking about MCP servers, and it was really great. So I just thinking about this open source tools can be connected and give even more good results. And use cases like identifying an overly permissive S3 buckets and mapping how it looks like. So here, just an example how the output looks like. So what can be founded with parts of AWS and some just keys what to do next. Prowler is my favorite one. I'm not giving advertisement, but it's one I really recommend to try for everyone. It's really actively promoting now very, I don't know, very popular, so a lot of people can help you with some setup on some forums or blogs, and they update it really, really quickly. So all new versions applied every time. Prowler is, there is paid version as well. I can't tell nothing about it because I use open source one. So here are some key features. For me, the first reason to apply was a compliance check. So if you your environment need to be checked, like about some CIS benchmarks or some other ones, it's really comfortable to run Prowler. Also, Prowler is added to Security Hub by AWS. So all the checks can be outputted not only in HTML or CSV formats, but also included in Security Hub, which makes it a really comfortable one. Because before working with Prowler, I tried Cloud Suite. I will mention it later. It was a really good one, but output was not available for Security Hub. And again, depends on your needs. If you don't need it, you can use it. So very cool for audits and scans for IAM, S3, EC2, RDS. And also they have some running for security assessment. Some scripts can be run from Prowler, open source as well. And actionable reporting, because a very detailed output with specific remediation steps. And as I mentioned, in different types of format, they even get this very beautiful HTML one and can be imported to Security Hub. And for real-world application used to run compliance scan and identify not compliant IAM roles. Also, I want to mention that at the end, I will share a link with the presentations, and we have webinar recording when we just was checking Prowler with IAM role analyzer, which cost, for effectivity, and who is suitable to use with. Yes, and here is example how Prowler looks like. We're talking about CLI, so we can just check status, service, and how critical the issue is. Also, sorry, about Prowler, you can do lists when some services was founded like non-compliant, but it's related to your infrastructure and it's okay for you. You just can add it to list and be ignored while counting your compliance mark. Then Baku is the best AWS exploitation framework. As I mentioned, some exploits also used by other tools, but this one really is the best one because a really big amount of modules and specific attacks. So more 50 for reconnaissance, privilege escalation, and exploitation. It's very easy to use, like Metasploit or something like that. Flexible and scriptable, so again, it's all open source one, and you just can add anything related, for example, for your organization, if you want to check it. And simulating real attacks, so why we need to use exploitation framework. So test some role escalation, some publicly acceptable resources, so the best, not the best, maybe the more regular way when I see using Paco in some labs or something like that, it's with privilege escalation scenario, so just to automate it. Some settings looks like here, so you can see some techniques, some functions which can be exploited by Paco. And other notable tools for AWS security, Scout Suite, it's a very popular one, also multi-cloud, Prowler is also multi-cloud, provides a high-level overview, so it's very useful when you, again, start your pen test and enumerate something and want to discover some paths you want to proceed with. Yes, and it's very quick read-only assessment for cloud environments. And Cloud Exploit, for me, again, it's very similar to Prowler, but was not so, had no so much integrations with AWS services like with Security Hub, but output was also very nice. How to choose the right tool? Here I tried to add one tool, but honestly, mostly of them can be applied to different types of stages. So for reconnaissance and enumeration, we can start with CloudFox to identify instruction, possible attacks, paths, potential misconfiguration, and just to see how it's possible to move inside your system. Penalties for non-compliance, as I mentioned, Prowler is the best one, but Cloud Exploit is not also the best. So run security assessment, adding some automation to check. So for example, also in links will be shared as a solution when you can run Prowler, and after succeed, it will just send you percentage of your CIS compliance to, for example, your Slack channel. And you just, our workflow for now is to run Prowler, see the percentage, fix part of it because infrastructure is really large. And after this, you will have an opportunity to run it again. It takes not more than 10 minutes and see how your compliance status was changed. For example, for some production compliances, it's not enough to use third parties, but if you have, again, a huge organization with a lot of staging environments, testing environments, it's really a good opportunity to cover some of your cost by using not native AWS tools. Breach notification timelines is Paco because it's really the best for exploitation and attack simulation, actively testing security and not like theoretical one, but really practical as well. Consent manager is Scout Suite. Honestly, it's the only one I'm not using actively. So multi-cloud security auditing, but some of already mentioned tools are as well. So like security audit, identifying some misconfiguration across AWS services. For me, it was even more interesting to run it to check with another tool. So if there was more findings or no. And continuous monitoring and misconfiguration detections, again, it can be used Cloud Exploit, it can use Prowler, so it's a really nice one, but can be integrated with AWS nicely, from my perspective. And best practices for safe and effective testing would be to get approvals. So, like every pen test you need to have permissions, some documents before testing any environment, and sometimes also you need to know before running AWS pen tests, organization must contact AWS and say that pen test will be running because AWS can block account, and there was really situations when environment was laying after, while discussing the situation with AWS. So it's not like usual penetration tester when you need reports, but if you are bug hunting not, so you really need to discuss it with AWS. Also isolate testing environment to use some separate AWS accounts and sandboxes. Limit impact, so to use read-only roles when it's possible. And what I want to mention is that for Prowler, for all these tools can be used security audit role. So it's a role which includes everything what is needed by scanners. So to read S3 access or something like that, so it won't be any impactful for you, but also you can proceed without always pinging some DevOps to change your access control. Of course, login and monitoring, so use some cloud trail or guard duty to track activities and what is changing, and always follow AWS policies. So as I mentioned, it's when we're talking about AWS, it's really important step. So I want to mention a few exploitation scenarios to understand it. So here is example with overly permissive AWS Lambda execution role. So what was done? The first step was to enumerate Lambda function to identify vulnerable functions with excessive permissions. Check IAM role permissions attached to the function. Abuse permission to create a new function and execute a payload to gain persistence. So after escalation of privileges, there will be opportunity to gain administrator access. So here just diagram, not very good visible on the screen, how it introduced, but here when you can try this scenario. So I really recommend Cyber Labs. There will be some labs presented here in my presentation. Also, they hosted a big amount of webinars. For example, some lab was created by our webinar about Prowler and this solution, how to run it to automate some of your work. So you can try it on Cyber, and if you're talking about mitigation steps, it would be to sanitize and validate all user input in Lambda functions, use AWS IAM Analyzer. I think from my perspective, I have one project who don't hate to work with IAM Analyzer and who really believes that it founds everything because first of all, it's not always help to find everything. So IAM Analyzer is not the thing I really like to work with. And another one, again, some roles or some functions are using maybe once a quarter. And just by Access Analyzer can be blocked, deleted, forget it, and before the situation when it's not very regularly running will be failed. Enable AWS Cloud Trail to monitor unusual Lambda activity, and it's really good ones because monitoring really helpful tool, but the only thing you need to check all the messages from it when something go wrong. And prevent Lambda for creating IAM users. In most situations, you don't need Lambda to create users, but just forget to delete this function from it. And another scenario is with Lambda remote code execution to cloud takeover. So it was provided enumeration Lambda functions to identify one that execute user input, inject and execute some arbitrary commands. If the Lambda role has like list buckets and get object, we will be able to extract sensitive data. Also, let's try with SSRF to send requests. and use stolen credentials to query secrets manager, to store password, IP keys, or database credential, or again, S3 enumeration really will take more time for all this scenario, and just use this compromised IAM role. So the scenario looks like we have attacker AWS Lambda S3 EC2, which will be doing with code injection vulnerability, which can be successful if you use needed payload, accessing with misconfigured S3 buckets, finding and using sensitive data from it, send crafted requests for SRF, and with successful flow, credential from secret manager will be returned, and attacker can retrieve access as well. Mitigation strategies is to sanitize and validate all user input in Lambda functions. So it's not only related to some web application or something like that. Limit IAM permission for Lambda functions accessing S3. Again, principle of least privileges is a must. Block EC2 SSRF attacking using WAF and proper input validation. Also, I want to share from our webinars some AWS WAF automation, how you can use WAF Lambda to send reporting every hour with most attacks. Because again, if you're talking about web application firewall which are built in without setting up correctly, setting up with your services, it won't be very effectively. But if you use only the rules you need, organize them in needed way, and receive some notification. Maybe again, in our solution it was to Slack, because we use Slack, and it's easier for us just to see the channel and see the statistics and only check if something is wrong, than every time to get access to WAF tab in AWS. Of course, restrict access to secrets manager with IAM roles, and monitor and logs and unusual requests. So now we move to the best practices and how the incident response strategy in place. So define roles and responsibilities for security incident. Or pen tests are working with some security access control on web application. Maybe you using permission metrics, so you just can easily check who need access for what. If we're talking about IAM roles, sometimes it's a little bit harder because it's a big amount of settings, and it's why we're using white listing, so starting only with some functions that we really need. Use CloudTrail Guard Duty to detect and respond to threats. Also, there is a lot of solution to use Lambda and automate your incident response, and implement. I already use it. Okay. Follow the principle of least privileges. Never use wildcards in IAM policy, even if you need it for 5 minutes, because it's a regular situation when DevOps just forget about that. Regularly audit IAM roles and remove unused permission, but be very accurate with it, because as I mentioned, there are situations when some roles are using not very regularly, but still in use. And use IAM Access Analyzer for this perspective. Also secure sensitive data and secrets, so like GitHub, so not credential in code, you just have secret manager to get your secrets in. Restrict access to S3 buckets, RDS, DynamoDB using IAM policies, because most of roles just don't need this access at all. And good thing is S3 versioning and object locked, so not be afraid that changes will apply without your control. And hard network and compute security, so please avoid public EC2 instances, because as I mentioned, when someone will find out it's public, it will be hard to secure it after IP is known. Limit security group rules and enable AWS WAF. It's really good things to prevent common web attacks, and what I want to say is that with really with XSS SQL injection, it works perfectly because it's not it's regular injections which can be applied. Or if some of your pages of your application need the functionality of some scripts, you can just add it to the whitelist, so not be blocked by WAF, but not forget about sanitize. And automate security audits and monitoring, so you can use AWS native tools like AWS config, but as I mentioned, it's really good things to use Prowler, CloudFlox, and Pacu. For some of you, it can be like for pen tests, just to understand the organization in limit amount of time, but sometimes it can be used by engineers as well, just to save some costs or recheck some functions, because as I mentioned, access analyzer not always the perfect solution. And enable login and threat detection, so CloudTrail, GuardDuty, VPC flow logs, or some custom solutions. And of course, perform regular security review and pen testing. So AWS is the thing which are changing really, really fast. So a lot of roles always apply, new services, AI services as for now. So for me, is the thing which is changing most regularly, let's say. And conclusion. So importance of identifying and mitigation misconfiguration. So some misconfiguration, even some which can be not important, you just can check some administrator access, but it would be like attach role, which was in one of the examples. So can lead to the significant data breaches and compliance risk. Effective tools for and techniques for AWS pen tests is CloudFox, Prowler, Pacu, and some additional tools, or even AWS native. The best thing is not like using one tool, but just to integrate them and use most effectively as you can. It's really easy to run, for example, some test EC2 instance and install all these tools there to run regular checks. And actionable steps to secure cloud environment, it automate regular security checks and audits, which can be done with this tool, some automation with Slack, and even with the web application firewall. Implement the principle of least privileges in IAM policies and in your life as well. And continuously monitor environments using AWS native tool and third-party solutions, because some of tools can be changed for third party. Some of compliance checks also need to run only some licensed one. So we can't say no for price solution from AWS, even if we really want it. And develop a strong incident response plan to handle misconfiguration quickly and effectively if something goes wrong. And maybe it can be something about honeypots, canary tokens, so you just can apply some data and again automate it with sending Slack requests when some of credential was in use, and just to understand that is something go wrong and you need to take an action. And security is a shared responsibility, so not need to tell that only security engineers must do it. So the to understand how it works, what can go wrong, which misconfiguration at least can be applied, is a responsibility of every team member, and it's really cool opportunity if you have this security champions in your team. Proactive monitoring and auditing to prevent breaches before they happen. Automate and enforce security control, so don't rely only on manual checks, because we was mentioned today security error by human. and plan to incidents, so have a response strategy and understand what you need to know. And here are some additional resources like AWS best practices, security hub, and some incident response guide. And here's additional resources from my perspective. So some security workshops from AWS, Techmagic security workshops, which we was running, and there was some topics related to Prowler, to WAF automation, also cheat sheet and lab to secure your cloud with Prowler, Security Digest newsletter to get to know about everything which happening and changes. And also I was mentioned Cyber Labs, but I really want to recommend Prevent Labs as well. And thank for the attention. By QR code you can download the presentation, and I also will be very happy if you leave feedback and some additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. Thank you for sharing your knowledge on the AWS Cloud. Now we have, in the interest of time, we probably have we're time for one question in the interest of time.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really nice. I definitely learned something new today. And I wanted to ask something about the open source tools that you've shown, especially the first three ones, CloudFox, Prowler, and Pacu. You've said that when you want to do penetration testing, you need to ask for permission from AWS, but at least for the first two ones, which only do risk assessment, do you need permission from AWS to?
Not a little bit else. So for this instrument, you can use created by security audit roles. It was created for such tools to run them and not make any impact on your infrastructure. So AWS would say nothing about it. But if you try to exploit something with Pacu or something like that, so in most cases you need to contact your client, for example, who need to contact AWS and say all the timelines when you need to prepare penetration tests. I'm lucky it was not my situation, but of my colleague when AWS really blocked the infrastructure.
Thank you.